Oh, baby. It's that time of the week. It is the Friday free-for-all mailbag. I'm Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. With me, as always, is that guy. He is the publisher at irishbreakdown.com, and it is Friday, which means
and
there's no topic.
I'm grumpy today, Vince.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thanks
I'm
for the
grumpy.
heads up, buddy.
Yeah, I'm grumpy today. I'm very grumpy today. I did it again. I ordered Jimmy John's 45 minutes ago.
Oh.
They are a mile and a half from our house, and it hasn't arrived yet. So I'm grumpy today. I'm very hangry. But there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about, and that's why I'm glad the show's today, because this always gets me in a better mood.
Yes. It's there's no topic. You guys dictate the topics.
One little topic at the beginning.
One little topic that we will jump to. A little bit of breaking news about 15-20 minutes ago. Both Kyren Williams and Kyle Hamilton pretty much simultaneously put out that they thank their teammates, et cetera, but they will be turning pro at the end of the year. No surprise there. And that they will both be not suiting up for the bowl game. So there's that.
Not surprising that both of them are going pro. We've talked about this. Anyone that listens to Irish Breakdown, we made very clear the other day, no matter what Kyren Williams said and what other people are reporting, Kyren Williams is going pro. He was not going to come back, nor should
absolutely
he have come
no.
back.
And I would have told him to do that. I mean,
correct.
That would have been my guidance towards him if I was one of the people in his corner and be like, look, man, go. I mean, it's time to go. And same thing with Kyle, obviously. They're projected different places in the draft, but either way, it's time to go.
The interesting thing is that Kyren Williams chose not to play in the bowl game. That was the question mark, and that's what we weren't sure of. And his agent, from what I'm told, talking to sources, his agent said he should sit out, and he listened to his agent, which is whatever. It is what it is. He chose not to finish what they started. So it's going to be very interesting. The Marcus Freeman era will begin without Kyle Hamilton and Kyren Williams, which is interesting. And I was told, got a little bit of scoop about this, but on the message board, so I won't get too much into it here, but they won't be with the team during bowl prep, and my understanding is they won't be at the bowl game either. That's what I was told. We'll see if that's how it transpires, but they are going to start focusing on their NFL futures now. So that was one interesting aspect to this. But if people want to talk more about this, we'll let you all talk about it.
That's right.
Because we want to dive into the mailbag.
Okay, here we go. I'm starting at the top. Here we go. 11:42. So this one's been in the queue for almost a little over an hour. Q Kibbs kicking it off. What do Buckner need? Wow. Okay, hold on. I got to read this in my head. What do you think Buckner needs to do in the offseason? Put on weight, footwork, build better timing, increase leadership, all of the above, whatever.
I mean, it's all of the above. I mean, he needs to work on continuing to fill out his frame, as all freshmen do as they go to be sophomores. He needs to work on his mechanics. He needs to work on consistency. He needs to work on being able to process information more quickly, make quicker decisions. His ball placement needs to be better. I mean, like any freshman, there's just nothing in his game that doesn't need to be worked on. We were actually talking about this on the message board last night. It's really funny that he has created sort of this kind of big contrast where there's some people that are like, he's the future, he's great. And I kind of fall into that camp. And then there's people that, like, because he wasn't perfect as a freshman after not having played football for 2 years, that, well, he can't pass and he can't do this and he can't do that. And, it's kind of interesting to see how kind of quickly some people are like, yeah, he's not the future. And it's like, well, look, kid didn't play football last year, right? We told you all summer, be patient with him. He's going to need time. I actually was impressed with what I saw from Tyler Buckner based on what my expectations were. Yeah. And he did some really good things. And at times he looked like a freshman who hasn't played a lot of football. So the future is very bright for Tyler Buckner. But the fact is there isn't a part of his game that does need to be improved upon. And that's going to be the key to him being able to beat out Drew Pine, because Drew Pine's game is going to continue to improve as well. Yeah. So it's going to be a fun battle here in the offseason. But, yeah, every part of his game needs work.
And there's plenty of people out there in the Drew Pine, camp, and I get it. I mean,
it's a good problem to have. You got two good quarterbaks.
Yeah, and there's going to be a legitimate competition in the spring. I mean, so it's going to be fun to watch. I enjoy quarterback competition personally. So, Skylar Hill Hey, Brian and Vince, the 22 schedule has been finalized. What are your initial thoughts on how it lays out for Notre Dame? I like it, spaced really well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about the schedule is there's some really good teams on it, right? So we won't have, barring something crazy happening, we don't anticipate having the problem that you had this year, where you play one good team, you lose to them, and then nobody else on your schedule's ranked. You will have Ohio State on the road. You'll have Clemson at home. You'll have BYU in a neutral field.
Yep.
I expect all three of them to be ranked by the end of the season. North Carolina, we'll see how they kind of bounce back. They're going to lose Sam Howell, and but they'll have Josh Downs back because he's a true sophomore. So I'm curious to see how they kind of develop now in year going into year 4 of Mac Brown's tenure. That'll be interesting. I'm curious if they find a new defensive coordinator or not, or if they think they can just keep rolling with Jay Bateman doing what he does. You've got USC now with Lincoln Riley. What are they going to be?
Right.
So there's some uncertainties there, but you've got Phil Jurkovec coming back for a 5th year because of the injury that he went through this year. So the schedule, and look, Stanford, who knows what they're going to do, right? I mean, they've got talent, but they're a mess of a program right now. It's a strange situation. And then, there's some quality teams. Look, Marshall's been a pretty good team the last couple of years. The group of 5 level, I mean, this year they had a winning record. The Charles Huff is their head coach now. Marshall went 7-5 this year. They went 7-3 last year. So that'll be a decent team. And you look at their losses, they lost by 4 points to a pretty decent East Carolina team. They lost by 1 point at Appalachian State, 6 points at Middle Tennessee. They lost by a touchdown to a pretty good UAB team. The only game where they really weren't competitive was against Western Kentucky in their last game. They're going to play Lafayette in a bowl game. So Coach Huff's doing some good things there at Marshall. That's a decent team. Cal's, assuming Justin Wilcox, he hasn't been fired, right? I don't believe he's been fired.
I don't think so.
But he's done a nice job there. UNLV stinks. Syracuse just bottomed out this year. They fell way off. Navy's not that good. So it's a challenging schedule, but to Skylar's point too, the spacing is good. So you have Ohio State, then 2 home games before you go at North Carolina. Then you have a bye before you go out to Las Vegas. Then you're at home for 2 straight weeks before you go at Syracuse, come back for Clemson. So, I mean, the 3 games leading up to the Clemson game are all kind of, let's be honest, winnable, and games shouldn't struggle. Then you're Navy against Baltimore. Then you're home for Senior Day against BC before you fly out to USC. So really the only stretch that I see where right now it's like 2 what I expect to be pretty good teams back-to-back is at the very end of the season with BC at home and USC on the road. Now with BC, what's going to happen with Zay Flowers? Does he come back? Does he go? I mean, so there's some questions there, but BC will be a good football team. They won't be a great football team. They'll be a good football team with a really good quarterback.
Right.
So I like how it's spaced out, and I would much rather play Ohio State in the opener than to have them, game 4 or 5 or something like that. Because now all your attention this offseason is focused on them, and theirs will be on you. But I like the schedule.
I think it's spaced out really well. I mean, you just broke it down. I'm not going to repeat what you said, but I think it is spaced out very, very well. Yeah. And the competition side of it, I think, is really good.
I don't like the soft schedules Notre Dame has had in recent seasons.
I agree,
and it wasn't all by design. Some of it was by design.
I don't think it was supposed. It was. I wouldn't have anticipated this year being as soft as it ended up.
You don't put Wisconsin on your schedule in September with Purdue and Florida State if you anticipate it being a soft schedule. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. I don't think it was by design. It just,
it's the way it worked
Florida
out.
State, it isn't as good as you thought. Thank you. Wisconsin isn't as good as you thought. I mean, North Carolina didn't have the jump that people thought that they were going to have. Most people thought they were going to have.
Sure.
So I think again, USC's fallen off. I mean, who anticipates that happening, right? Yeah. I mean, so it's not that they meant to soften the schedule. Jack Swarbrick has done a good job of making the schedules more manageable, spacing things out. But the reality is what can tend to happen when you don't have 4 Big Ten teams to start your season off with like they used to. Is sometimes if a couple teams aren't as good as you think, your schedule doesn't look as good.
Right.
And this year was especially bad. When you talk about winning 11 games and not one of them being ranked. I mean,
it hurt them in the long run, obviously.
It did.
Yeah,
it did.
A couple super chats I'm going to get to, then I'll head back up to the top. Demetrius Rex, thank you very much. CJ Williams sounds confident after talking to Tommy that the offense will be less tight end and running back focused going forward. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's a good explanation. It's an easy thing. Look, we had Michael Mayer and CJ and Kyron Williams. Of course,
Right.
we're going to be based on that. But, you kind of point to the late season and you see how the receivers were making a lot more plays. It's going to be an easy sell. But, I mean, it's an easy thing to sell. Now it's about going out and doing it. That's going to be the key. But, I mean, I think the pitch worked, and everything I'm told is that things went really well with them.
It's a really good question here from Andrew. Thank you for the super chat, Andrew. Does Notre Dame need to average the top 5 recruiting class to win a championship, or is 6 to 10 enough?
I don't care. I mean, Clemson, I think, had like one top 5 class when that, leading up to their championship team. They've had like one top 5 class in the last 4 or 5 years. I don't care what Rivals thinks or 247 Sports thinks, right? I care about having legitimate top 5 classes based on how an actual coach would evaluate it. And it's rarely going to be that way. It's about meeting your needs, balance, finding impact players at the right positions, meeting your needs based on what you did this year, meeting your needs based on what the makeup of your roster is, things like that. And I mean, we see it all the time. Florida State will have a top 5 class because they signed a bunch of guys at 3 positions. They didn't sign any good offensive linemen, no quarterback, and yet they're top 5
And the
class.
balance is so important that never gets talked about. It never – it's just all the points-based system.
Exactly.
I hate it.
And I understand why they do it, but I don't think they need to average that. There's some built-in biases there in the rankings that, because you tend to see the best players be in the South, and they overinflate more players from the South. And it's just the way that it goes. So, Andrew, I care more about what they're adding, and I care a lot less about where it falls and what Rivals or 247s thinks. You can look at a top 5 class and say, boy, I don't know if that met the needs that they were looking for. Like, for example, this year, I anticipate Notre Dame ranking in the top 5. But my concern is going to be, okay, that's a top 5 because you were great everywhere, but I didn't love the quarterback. Right. I mean, so you got to be honest and objective about those things, but it's still a great class that meets a lot of needs. Now you're in a situation where, okay, but you better go get that quarterback in 2023. So, I mean, for me, I don't care a whole lot about that. I don't think it's about averaging. They got to identify the players they want and need, and they got to get those guys.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's going to be the key.
No, absolutely.
And if they finish 3rd or 2nd in recruiting, that's awesome.
Right.
As long as they're
meeting the needs.
There you go.
Exactly.
And if they finish 7th, then I don't care about that either, as long as they're meeting the needs, And
come here and we'll let you know if they're meeting the needs, believe me.
There you go. There you go.
Okay. Rye has one. It's kind of a long one, so bear with me here, but this is a really good question because we hear about this all the time about Notre Dame being in the Catholic schools, right? So Notre Dame has done a great job getting into Georgia and other states when it comes to recruiting. My hope is Freeman dives back into the Catholic high schools and we can start getting some talent back. Realistically, how much of the top talent actually comes from Catholic high schools every year? I understand each year is different, but do they normally produce like other big high school academies? I think it's a really good question.
I'd have to look at that. We talked about this last week. The Catholic schools in the region that supply Notre Dame from an institution just don't produce the football players they used to produce. I mean, you look at Ohio, and some people didn't like this, but I talked about you look at St. Ignatius, right, and St. X and programs like that, right, and those are great high school programs. They're still some of the best programs in the state of Ohio, right,
no doubt,
but they don't produce the volume of big time players that they used to produce, right? And when they do, Notre Dame tries to go after them like they did when they got Liam Eichenberg from St. Ignatius. But there haven't really been any big time players that have come out of Ignatius since Eichenberg in 2016. It's just a different time now. When those kids are there, Notre Dame goes and gets them. I mean, you look at the Chicago Public League or Chicago Catholic League. They're not producing top players like they used to. I mean, they used to be a feeder program to Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's not recruiting them because they're not recruiting Catholic schools or anything like that. And that's not what Rye is saying. I'm adding commentary to the question. It's just that they're not producing talent. And then what you're also saying is that a lot of Catholic schools that are good, there are kind of football programs more so than it being a bunch of kids that come from a Catholic background or heritage. It's kids that go there in their final couple years to play football. Well, they're not going to have the same view of Notre Dame as 20 years ago when a kid went to a Catholic school.
Yep.
And so it's and also there's just some areas like Georgia where you're starting to see more of the football academic schools aren't Catholic schools. They're either Christian schools or just private schools. And so that's going to be a factor, so it's about, you got to go where the talent is right now. If there's a Catholic school kid in the North or Northeast that fits what Notre Dame's looking for, I definitely want to see them go after them, because I always like St. Peter's Prep, right?
Right.
Things like, they got the Adamiolas and Shane Simon, guys like that. So if there are guys that fit the need, then you definitely go for them. They should kind of get prioritized to a degree. But you've got to go where the players are. And right now, the players aren't at a lot of Catholic schools that are producing the same traditional type of Catholic school kid that would always kind of favor Notre Dame if Notre Dame came calling. It's just the landscape is just way different. I have a super chat I want to pull up, Vince.
Okie doke.
This is just a thank you from Triple Deck Poe. Thank you for the content. It fills the gaps in my day. # gap closers.
That's great. I love that. I love the adaptation of the gap closers.
Yes.
I like that.
Love it.
That's
Thank you
stuff.
for that.
That's good stuff. All right, my turn.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Just go.
Okay. Mike, thanks, Mike. Thoughts on potential transfers? I think, unless you're hearing something that I'm not, I think we're still a little early in the game for that.
Yeah.
We heard from Litchfield Ajavon yesterday that he's going to his intent to transfer, but I think the majority of people that will end up transferring, you won't really know about until we see 5th, 6th year decisions, NFL decisions, and because they need to see what the depth chart like. So unless they're super unhappy and they know it's not going to get any better, or whatever the case may be, right, and they were going to transfer regardless, I think some of these guys are going to need to see how the depth chart shakes out first.
Mm-hmm. And that's what Notre Dame needs to do when they're looking at the portal.
Right.
Now, do I think Notre Dame is already kind of keeping their eye on the portal? Yes, they are. But they're kind of, number one, you got to see who you get on signing day, right? You may not be all that interested in a wide receiver right now in the portal. But if Kevin Austin goes pro, which is a potential thing, whether we all think it should be or not, it shouldn't be, but it is. If you don't get C.J. Williams and Amorian Walker, all of a sudden the transfer portal becomes a whole lot more important.
Absolutely.
You're going to try to get some kids here in February, but you're most likely going to have to go to the portal. So this next week is going to determine just what your needs are. And I don't think it's firmly established what Notre Dame's needs are. They need to find out what Jarrett Patterson's going to do, what Isaiah Foskey's going to do, what Jason Adamiola is going to do, what Cam Hart's going to do. And I anticipate most of those guys coming back, but they still need to make the decision, right? I need to find out what Kevin Austin's going to do. You need to find out if you can keep all the guys in your class. We think that they will, but in this day and age, you never know. So I think we're a week away from really, really being able to dive too much into that.
I think that's fair. Here we go from Raheem Pelham. Which current or incoming freshman do you think will have the biggest impact next year? That's two different questions, because you've got current freshmen, and those are easy, like Joe Alt, Blake Fisher, guys
Deion
like
Colsey,
that.
Lorenzo Styles, Logan Diggs.
Estime.
It's a long list.
Yeah, it's a long list of current freshmen. I think the more interesting
Tyler Buckner.
Yeah, fair enough. I think the more interesting part of this question would be incoming freshmen. So guys that aren't on campus just yet.
Well, again, I think part of this boils down to, Raheem, this is a great question, but part of this boils down to who comes back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So for example, what I mean by that is if Kevin Austin comes back, then I don't know if Tobias Merriweather's going to have the same sort of immediate playing time. He'll play, but will it be enough? Will be a ton. If Kevin Austin goes pro, now all of a sudden Deion Colsey and Tobias Merriweather are going to be battling for a lot of playing time and a lot of touches, right? Hopefully. Unless Notre Dame just decides to bring Dell back, which means you probably put, just Joe Wilkins out there, and, it is what it is. But that kind of factors into it. If Avery Davis doesn't come back, then and they sign C.J. Williams, and all of a sudden C.J. Williams is going to be battling for playing time because Notre Dame's recruiting him in the slot, right? You see what I'm saying? So, and then you'd put Lorenzo and does Braden Lindsey come back? There's so many things that are going to factor into this. I think that some freshmen that I have my eye on as being guys are going to play. I have a hard time seeing Tyson Ford not being on the field next year.
Sure.
I think the freshman linebackers are going to make their presence felt. I don't know if that's
such a good group.
I don't see it as being like starters, but they're going to play. They're going to be on special teams.
Special teams is going to be the big one there. I think.
Really curious to see what Benjamin Morrison and Jaden Mickey can do at cornerback, battling in their first years. I think both of them have a chance to crack the lineup, either as ones or twos or nickels or some role. They're going to be hard to keep off the field.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Jadarian Price at running back and the receivers. I mean, all the receivers should have a chance to push. I mean, right now, Notre Dame has no depth chart at receiver.
Yeah. Right. It's starters and whoever's coming in.
And especially if Kevin Austin leaves, I mean, and Avery Davis doesn't come back.
Avery Davis, Braden Lindsey. I mean, those three guys all go.
Well, and I expect at least one of them to come back. But
I do too.
Still, but it's so they're not cop-outs. It's just I may not think a guy's going to play right now, but if so-and-so leaves and we didn't anticipate that, then I'm going to feel right. It's like right now, it's like, well, I don't see any center on the team playing a whole lot next year. I could say that right now on December 10th, and it makes sense. But if 3 weeks from now Jarrett Patterson goes pro, then that statement just is going to look stupid because you're like, well, now of course they're going to play because there is no Jarrett Patterson. So that's my thing is I just want to see how those guys go. And we have a quarterback super chat here, Vince.
Sweet.
Andre Rainey says, is Pine or Buckner good enough to lead Notre Dame to a natty? Are we in line to land a top quarterback in the next couple of years? Vince, go ahead and take a crack at that first one.
I would say that I would feel comfortable with either one of them at quarterback for Notre Dame. I really would. I would feel comfortable with either one because of the scheme that Notre Dame will be employing. I think that it would look different, obviously, whether Pine or Buckner are going to be the guy. I think the Pine would be more of a Jack Cohn style offense where he's the point guard and he's getting the ball out to all of his different weapons. And I think Buckner, obviously, you're going to see him use his legs a little bit more and things like that. So I think it's more about the talent around them, but I think both are good enough to lead Notre Dame to the national championship with what I'm seeing around them and what I'm seeing from the coaching staff. So that's number one. Number two, are we in line to land a top quarterback in the next couple of years? I mean, I would say Dante Moore is a pretty darn good quarterback.
There's a lot of guys on the board. They just got to close.
Yeah, exactly.
That's going to be the key.
So are they in line? Yeah, but they got to close.
Right.
And we've said that. Gosh, I wish I had a nickel for every time I heard Brian say they got to close over the last year. I'd be a rich man. And they do. They have to close, and that's going to be the
we did make a shirt out of it, basically.
It is a good point. That is a very good point. So great question, Andre.
I gotta pull this up, Vince. I got to pull this up.
What do you got? Pine is like Jack Cohn and Ian Book had a baby. Okay, first of all, Andrew, that's hilarious and pretty accurate.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to that. Yeah,
there's something to that. And
he's not the runner that Ian was. He doesn't have the size that Jack has. But from a style of play standpoint, I get what you're saying there.
I totally get what you're saying.
Back to Andre's question: are they good enough to lead Notre Dame to a natty? Buckner is more capable of kind of putting the team on his shoulders and leading them to a national championship. Pine, to me, as I've said all along, if you put really good pieces around him, which they're going to have next year, his ability to distribute, make plays, his intelligence, all that kind of stuff is good enough to win, in my opinion. And it won't be easy because, at the end of the day, you get into a matchup where the other quarterback is capable of putting a team on his shoulders, then then a lot of times that team's going to have a better chance of winning. But if the players around him are good enough, then absolutely, I think Drew Pine has the ability, the intelligence, the throwing ability, the playmaking ability to go out and win a title. It's just going to depend on how quickly Tyler Buckner, develops. Because at the end of the day, Tyler Buckner is still the more dynamic player, and you're always going to lean towards that guy if it's close. And that's why it's going to be a battle for Drew Pine. But if you know anything about Drew Pine, that kid is going to battle his butt off this offseason.
He's going to welcome it. I mean,
and if Tyler Buckner, and if Tyler Buckner is the starting quarterback next year, it means he had to earn it and play really well.
Absolutely.
Because Drew Pine is only going to get better, and there's no way Drew Pine doesn't go down. If he doesn't start, he's going to do everything in his power to make sure that he is the starter. And if he doesn't start, it's because you have to flat out beat him out. Big time. I mean, you have to beat him out.
I agree.
And that's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy.
John A1 says this offseason is big for Tommy Rees. If the right O-line coach is hired, what is Tommy's main focus? What does Tommy's main focus need to be?
It just needs to be on becoming a more explosive offense. I mean, that's really the big key, while not sacrificing efficiency. And this is going to always be my answer, John. It's in today's era, you have to have the right combination of explosiveness and efficiency.
Right.
Alabama was a super explosive offense in 2020, but they were an elite, all-time great, efficient offense in 2020. You have a quarterback completing like 78% of his passes, and he's throwing deep. I mean, that's right. Explosive and efficient, and that's the key. And finding the way to best accent your players, right? Like if you look at the players Notre Dame is going to have, when we kept focusing on RPOs and creating more levels, concepts, and spaces, because that's what fits the players they have. If they had Chase Claypool and Miles Boykin, I'd be looking for them to focus on some different concepts, because that's what would fit those players.
Right.
And so it's just about building around your talent, using space to your advantage, being able to attack teams for the width and length of the field is very important. Notre Dame has always been a really good attack, the width of the field. They haven't always been a good attack in the length of the field. We started to see that second half of the year. And then the other focus of it needs to be to get the offensive line going. That's going to be a big key, because if you get the offensive line going, then he can do whatever the heck you want. You know what I mean? You're going to be successful as long as it's within the framework of what we discussed. Explosive and efficient. And if you go tempo, that's great. But, I always like to see a little bit of a push. I don't want to see like 5 seconds on the play clock when you're snapping the ball all the time. But you don't need to be Oregon 2020 from 2010. We've talked about that. But be aggressive. Yeah. That's going to be a big thing. Be aggressive. And you're going to have the defense to allow you to do that. And that's the thing that I think Brian Kelly always got wrong. And I think this impacted Tommy Rees. They had a great defense. So he took the mantra on offense of let's play to that defense. So don't make a mistake. Don't do this. Whereas I look at it as you have a great defense, which means you should be able to take more chances.
They can cover up your mistakes.
Right.
I mean, they can make up for
it. Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
And so those are the things that I want to see more of for moving forward.
For me, for this question about what does his main focus need to be, I agree with everything you said about the offense and everything, but I think this is a real great opportunity for Tommy Rees to develop Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine. Because the mantra under Brian Kelly is that quarterbacks weren't developed under during his tenure. And I think this is a great opportunity. You've got two guys, they're going to battle it out in the spring for the starting quarterback job. And they're both young, and they both have been under Tommy Rees their entire college career. So I think this offseason is a great opportunity for Tommy to show people his chops as a quarterback's coach as well, and to bring those two guys along and develop them and get either or both of them ready to be the starter at Notre Dame. And I think that is going to be huge for Tommy Rees. Now, everything Brian said is absolutely accurate about the offense, being efficient, being explosive, but he's also the quarterback's coach. This is a big year for being a quarterback coach at Notre Dame, in my opinion.
Of course, what I said is right. You're not allowed to disagree with me. Didn't you know that? Didn't you get that memo?
I must have missed that one.
Come on, Vince. We do have a super chat down here. We got a couple I want to get to real quick. Spark5219. Not sure if it's too early for this question, but do you know who the early enrollees are for this recruiting class? I know some of them. I believe Steve Angeli's an early enrollee. I believe Jadarian Price, Tobias Merriweather. I'm not sure about C.J. Williams. I think he's an early enrollee as well.
I think that's what I had heard as well. But
I think both tight ends are early enrollees. I'm pretty sure that Jalen Sneed is going to be an early enrollee. I believe Nolan Ziegler is going to be an early enrollee. I believe Josh Burnham is as well, but I'm not 100% certain on that. I believe Jaden Mickey is going to be an early enrollee, and I believe that I believe Benjamin Morrison is as well. Again, I'm not 100% sold on those, but that's who I can recall. That doesn't mean that Tyson Ford and Engelbert aren't. I'm just unsure of them. So
Did you mention any of the offensive linemen?
No, because I'm not sure on any of them.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, so like I said, it's not that they're not. I don't know. I don't want to speak out of turn and then have to come back and say, oh, my bad. I said something wrong. I do that enough. So I can try to avoid it as much as I can. And then a real quick one, just for Melvin Whitney. And Spark, thank you for the super chat. Melvin, thank you for the super chat as well. During the coaching search, you mentioned that a coach came in the interview. Can you say who that was? I'm not going to say that like in this format. I think I might have mentioned on the message board, but I don't even think I put it on there. It's
not important.
It's not important. Yeah. And also it's not, I haven't been given the okay to say that publicly. And I always try to, when a source tells me, hey, don't say this publicly, I don't say it. And if I do say it, like hey, could I at least say this part? Yes, but don't say the name. That's pretty much how the conversation went. So I'm going to honor that because I would like to
not burn your source.
Keep sources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. No doubt about that. John has a question here. To compete. I think it's compete.
Yep.
I'm going to go with compete. To compete with the elite teams, which position has to improve the most? DBs or wide receivers?
That's easy for me. It's DBs.
That's what I was going to say too.
And honestly, I don't think you need elite receivers to be really good. It's nice because I think if you're a good coach and you're creative, exactly. I don't think Oklahoma had great receivers this year. I don't think they've had great receivers in some other years. I mean, some years they had. I mean, they had CeeDee Lamb and Hollywood Brown. They had elite receivers.
Right.
But there's been other years they have good receivers, but they weren't elite. At least they weren't quite as good as what their production in college would dictate, which is why they either didn't do anything in the NFL or were lower draft picks. But you can scheme your way into success, I believe, offensively to a degree. Now, that doesn't mean that I want a bunch of, I don't even want to say a name because it's going to come across as disrespectful, but just not elite players, right? I mean, you want to have really good players, but if I could have, pretty good players at receiver and a great scheme, or great DBs, I'm taking great DBs because I believe on defense there is still truth to the notion that you need to have top-level players. I mean, I think defense is and always will be more about the talent than it is about the coaching. Now, you need to be both to be elite, but we know the Notre Dame has the coaching. I do think there needs to be an upgrade from a talent standpoint in the secondary, and that's what's been so exciting about what Mike Mickens has done because – the cornerback recruiting he's done since he arrived has been really impressive. Now, we haven't seen that manifest into sort of on-field success yet, and that's going to be the key for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at least as far as evaluating players and things like that, I really like what he's done.
I have a lot of faith in Coach Mickens. I really do. But that would have been my answer as well, because again, you can scheme yourself into explosive plays and explosive offense. And defense is like, my guy's better than your guy. Go for it. You know what I mean? And that is kind of a major deal. So I think that's really important for sure. Next one up is Tavis McKay. Says, what is the main thing that you look for in Notre Dame during Marcus Freeman's debut as potential for the future? So I believe what this is saying is during the Fiesta Bowl, what are we looking for from a Marcus Freeman-led team to dictate what the future is going to look like for Notre Dame? For me, it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about this until I saw this question. And I want to see some freedom offensively. I want to see a little bit of Tommy Rees's fingerprint on the offense, which I think we started to see in the second half. It's going to be interesting if Marcus Freeman isn't calling the defense. And I think we'll know that as we get closer. Because if he's not, then what does the defensive philosophy look like on the field from a play calling standpoint? That'll be interesting. But again, there's only so much you can glean from a game that's only 3 weeks into the tenure of a head coach, as opposed to one after an entire offseason.
I don't think we're going to see a huge change in scheme.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not too worried about that for the bowl game. I just go win the game. That's the big thing for me.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
But for me, it's the energy. It's we think because it's a 35-year-old coordinator and all that this team is going to play with more passion and energy, and I believe that to be true. But I want to see it now.
Yeah, well, your most passionate offensive player is going to not be there,
right?
So that is a thing, right?
Right.
I mean. So, yeah.
So it's how does he inspire his team to play with emotion and energy and then harness emotion and energy? Not right. You don't want guys to be emotional because that's when you make mistakes and make penalties and, don't play discipline, but play with emotion and passion and fire. I want to see pads pop. And I just want to see that. To me is going to, is going to tell me a whole lot more about what Marcus Freeman's doing than play calls and things like that. It's what's the energy level? Because if you can do that for a bowl game where there's really nothing on the line from a championship standpoint, then I have a lot more confidence you're going to go into Columbus and do that. And you're going to do that when you play Cal and Marshall and those other type of teams. So that's more of what I care about than necessarily specific scheme and things like that for me.
Yeah, makes sense. Utah Irish, can you talk about evaluating recruits and what goes into it? When I watch these high school films, I feel every D1 recruit is dominant because of obvious talent gap. How do you decide who's better? This is a really, really good question. Because I think it's not easy to do.
Right. For me, the way I do it, and I can only speak to what I do, is I grade players. So I have a list of different things that I grade, and then I have criteria under each thing that I evaluate. So I look at, and they kind of fall into three categories. One is size, body, frame. That's a part of it. So if you have two guys, everything's equal. One guy is 6'4", 215. The other one's 5'8", 155. You're going to take the 6'4", 215-pound guy more often than not, depending on what your scheme is. So the other part is athletic skills. So looking at agility, balance, quickness, flexibility, speed, explosiveness, all those type of things. And then the third part is the technical aspects. Technique. Do they play with good technique now? Do they have the potential to play with good technique with good coaching? Some guys don't. Some guys are call them waist benders versus knee benders, right? You want guys that have flexibility in their knees that they can really bend at the knees. Some guys have tight lower bodies and they have to be more waist benders. So that's a technical thing where no matter how good a coach is, you're not teaching a guy who can't bend his knees to bend his knees, right? You're not teaching a cornerback who has tight hips to be a great hip flipper, right? Because he just can't do it. So you look at those type of things, but then it's to the degrees. Because, for example, the last Division III school I was at, I recruited a running back from Northwest Ohio that rushed for over 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns in high school. He was a dominant high school football player. He's about 5'8", 215 pounds, and he ran about a 4.7. He was a dominant high school football player, but he wasn't a Division I football player.
Right.
And so it comes down to those attributes, and then, being able to differentiate between, one of the hardest things I think people have is when they look at a dominant player and relative to the competition he plays. Now, I always say competition doesn't matter. And what I mean by that is if you're a 4.5, you're a 4.5. It doesn't matter who you're running the 4.5 against. Right. The problem that people have, however, is they can't tell that a guy's a 4.5 if he's playing against slower competition. And I think that's something that comes with work and expertise and things like that. But sometimes it's just it's why schools like to see a guy at a camp. Exactly. Because they want to see, they want to see him, work out directly in those type of things. So, I just think it comes down to also about who fits, right. Because you're going to look at your system okay, this guy may be a good player and this guy's a good player. Well, why'd you go with that guy? Because that guy fits what we do. And that guy's more of a zone guy, or whatever the case may be.
This question goes along with it. That's why I pulled it up. It's not really in order. Obviously, I don't know if Nicholas has listened to Brian in the past, but
he's new. He's new to our channel.
Yeah, I figured. So he asked, does the star level of recruit really matter? I'm keen on that. No matter the star level, it's all about developing the player regardless. Are there flaws or biases with the star system?
Yeah, of course there's flaws. Everybody has biases. I have biases. I try to do things to protect myself against the biases, but if you look at the receivers that I've missed on for the most part during my Notre Dame tenure, most of them have been bigger guys because I have a bias towards big receivers. And so I will give them maybe sometimes more benefit of the doubt than I'll give a 6 foot, 175-pound guy. So that's partly, things like that are partly why I had to create the system that I created to try to balance those things out. So that way my grading scale wasn't putting too much emphasis on size and more balancing it out so that I could have a better grasp on players. This is a debate that will never end. And you're going to people say stars matter. And they'll say, well, look, the higher percentage of 5 stars equal such and such. And then the people that say stars don't matter think, well, more 3 stars go to the NFL than 5 stars. And then it's because there's more 3. And it's just a never ending debate. Here's where I say stars don't matter. Stars don't define your talent, which is why some 5 stars don't pan out. Some guys, you don't need a anyone worth a darn to be anyone that just has rudimentary football knowledge can look at Trevor Lawrence coming out of high school and say, yeah, that guy's a 5-star, right? It takes the special person to look at a Joe Burrow and say that guy's got a ton of upside, right? And that's where it comes down to. The reason stars are a bad indicator of success, and the reason you don't. And there was another question that somebody had about, do I think Nicholas had this in another question, like, do coaches look at that? Some do.
Mm-hmm.
Good ones don't. Now, you look at Alabama, for example. They recruit a lot of 5-stars, but that's because those guys, they evaluate and they believe that they can fit. Now, here's the other part of it. Not every 5-star is recruited because the school thinks he's a 5-star. I know this for a fact. They say, hey, we like this kid, but we like this kid over here better. But, we're going to take that kid because he's a good player and all those type of things. But, they may not think he's the guy that rivals or 247 think that he is.
Right.
And so, and then that gets into, we've talked about this like with Ohio State, for example. Say, well, this team has X amount of 5-stars. And I say, I don't care how many 5-stars they have in the recruiting ranks. How many in the starting lineup? That's what I care more about. So, like, when you looked at Ohio State's 2014 title team, they had like 7 or 8 3-stars starting in their on offense. And people talk about, the linebacking core. You had 2 guys that were in the NFL for that linebacking core. In your starting lineup, you had a 5-star in the starting lineup. You had a top 200 player in your starting lineup, and you had a 3-star in your starting lineup. Okay? The 5-star went undrafted. The 4-star top 200 guy was a 3rd-round draft pick, and the 1st-round draft pick was the 3-star. But you look, 5-star. Right. And there were 5-stars backing up the 3-star. So it's about who plays, but it's about development. It's about fit. It's about upside. It's about looking at a kid that is a 5-star now and saying, okay, does he have room to grow? Does he need room to grow? Some don't. Some guy, Leonard Fournette didn't need to develop. He was a 5-star and he was always going to be a 5-star. Other guys are 5-stars because they dominate because they're so much bigger than everybody else. But then you got to look at their skill set and say, hey, this kid doesn't project to be the player you thought. Remember the kid? It was Drew Pine's cousin. Remember that kid? And he was ranked as like a 5-star by rivals like Kevin Pine, and everybody loved him.
Okay.
And Notre Dame's got to get him. He's Drew Pine's cousin and all this kind of stuff. And Notre Dame didn't recruit him. And some people got mad. Well, he went to BC, I think, and they haven't heard anything from him since because he was a big kid that just dominated inferior competition.
Right.
And he wasn't a guy that coaches felt projected to really be that at the next level. So stars don't matter to me because, number one, you can find great players of all stars. Number two, a player isn't good because he was assigned a certain star ranking. That's the other thing that doesn't matter. Now, some elite players are 5-stars. Some elite players are 3-stars. Jeremiah Wusu-Koromo was a guy that, Vince, he was a 3-star kid. We loved him at Irish Breakdown. I was actually at Rivals at the time. I gave him a 4-star grade, a 4.5-star upside, and I probably undersold the upside a little bit. But you looked at it and you saw potential to grow. Right. I think the other thing is we're seeing more and more misses by the recruiting services now because they're putting so much emphasis on things that generate clicks and interest and positives for them, their own camps, things like that, than they did back in the day when it was more about the integrity of the ranking system.
Right.
And I think that hinders it as well.
Wholeheartedly. John says, if Austin and Lindsay return along with the group being properly coached, who would be the most talented wide receiver on the roster? Will Styles and Merriweather make a jump to be the number 1 or number 2?
If everybody comes back, as far as just the most God-given ability, it would come down to, again, take development and age out of it, just pure talent. It's either going to be Austin or Merriweather would be the 2 most talented. Now, obviously, Austin would be ahead of Merriweather because he's been there, 5th-year senior,
right? As
far as where they are from a development standpoint, but just God-given ability, it'd be those 2 guys, in my opinion. And there's going to be other people that would argue it's Braden Lindsay or Avery Davis or C.J. Williams or Deion Colsey. Because there's Lorenzo Styles. Because that's what excites me is that this is going to be a really talented. Even if Kevin Austin leaves, it's going to be a really talented receiving corps. It's just going to be a little less. It's going to be a lot less experienced.
Yeah. Well, and Dan's comment here is similar. Coach, let's assume that the new O-line coach, the O-line has a huge improvement next season. Do you think the receiving corps will improve enough to be elite, even if 3 or 4 seniors return?
I mean, I got to find out whether Dell's coming back or not. If Dell Alexander comes back, I have my doubts about that, just because I don't think he's good at teaching the fundamentals, and I don't think he's done a good job throughout his career of getting younger players ready to play. And if Notre Dame loses some younger guys or some of the veteran guys, and it comes down to he has to develop the younger players, I'm just not confident he's going to be able to do that. I hope I'm wrong, because we've said all along, I like Dell. As a person, I like Dell. And I hope he proves me wrong. I said the same thing about Jeff Quinn before the season. I hope he proved me wrong. Unfortunately, he didn't.
Right.
And he won't be back next year.
Right.
Hopefully, if Dell gets brought back, he does. But, I mean, it should. But at the end of the day, the scheme is going to be a big part of this. If Tommy Rees is scheming teams up, then you don't necessarily have to require the great technique as much as you do when they were running the old system, which was more about one-on-ones and winning and being – the better player, and the technique was more important, which is why they would struggle even with great players against some of the better teams, because they didn't have that. If you're scheming guys open, then yes, technique is always important in football. It's just not quite as important. And that's going to be the challenge for Dell or whoever's the receivers coach. But can they? Yes. Will they? I don't know.
Fortnite Blaze. Do you guys know if defensive coordinator Knowles will coach for Oklahoma State in the bowl game, or is he preparing for the Irish game one, Ohio State, or both?
My understanding is he is coaching them in the bowl game, and he won't start focusing on Ohio State until after the bowl game. That's my understanding. Vince, have you seen anything different on that?
I have not seen anything different, but I will say that facing Notre Dame twice in a row is not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, as far as if I'm sitting in his shoes – and I'm talking to Ryan Day, and I'd be like, hey, let me coach against these guys and get a little, get some experience against Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. And then that can only help us moving forward for next year.
It could, but it could also hurt them.
That's
because,
true.
As I've said, I think Notre Dame is going to pretty much be in the bowl game what they've been all year. I don't think they're going to change a whole lot.
From a personnel standpoint, seeing guys in person.
But if they're going to have a different quarterback, which is going to make the offense look different.
That's true.
They're going to have a different offensive line coach. If Tommy Rees makes even more adjustments in the offseason that we hope and think he's going to make, then the offense is not going to look like it did against Oklahoma State. I do have a super chat that I want to pull up here, Vince.
Hit it.
Garth Cassidy.
Thanks, Garth. Appreciate that very much. Fellas, with Kyron sitting out of the bowl game, do you think we could get more Estime? Look, Estime is going to be the number 3 back, I would imagine, and we see the third back. Normally in Notre Dame games, it's going to be, I would assume, primarily Chris Tyree and Logan Diggs, and then when they need a third back, it's going to be Estime, and they may find a niche for him, maybe on the goal line or whatever, as the number 3 back. But my guess is it's going to be Tyree, Diggs, and Estime in that order. For the bowl game. So, yes, I mean, you're going to see more of him because he just moved up one spot on the depth chart. So I think that's definitely something that we could see for sure.
I would have loved to have seen Kyron Williams play one more game.
Me too. Oh, absolutely.
He's so much fun to watch.
Yes.
Having said that, if we are looking ahead to next year, this is an opportunity where the player chose to allow you to develop your depth chart for next year.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to see what is Tommy Rees and Lance Taylor going to do with a backfield of Logan Diggs and Chris Tyree? How does that shape up? How do you use Logan's sort of every down ability with Tyree's explosive ability? How do you utilize that?
And I got a question for you when you're done there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you already asked it, so you already interrupted me, Vince. You might as well ask your question.
All
Jeez.
Right. So,
and I was going to talk about Audric too, and Vince just does not want to talk about it.
Took it away from you, brother. For me, I see Logan Diggs as more of a complete back than Chris Tyree. And what I mean by that is more of a 3-down back than Tyree. Do you see a possibility where Logan Diggs is kind of the quote-unquote number 1 back and Tyree has a similar role that he had this year behind Kyron Williams?
I would hope it's not similar to this year.
Okay.
No. I would hopefully – now, the first part of what you said, I was about to agree with, of Logan Diggs being sort of the number 1 back. I was going to agree with that until you said Tyree like this year.
Okay.
If you're not getting Chris Tyree 8 to 10 touches a game on offense, you are not doing your job.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
If he's healthy.
Yeah. Right.
If he's healthy.
Right.
So, no, I don't think that Logan Diggs needs to be the volume guy that Kyron was this year.
Okay.
I think those two need to complement each other more effectively. I think Chris Tyree needs to get touches more. I think the problem that I had with Notre Dame early in the season, and we didn't really get a chance to see what they would do in the second half of the year because he was banged up for much of the second half of the year.
Right.
Is will they be able to utilize Chris Tyree more effectively in an offense that's more built around speed and tempo and getting the ball to the perimeter? What they tried to do with him early in the season is they just put him in and had him do the same stuff Kyron was doing. They're different runners.
Absolutely.
And I feel like what they did not do a good job of this year is using Chris Tyree in ways that benefited Chris Tyree as a runner. Now, we saw them do some jet sweeps and things like that, and that's all fine and dandy. But there are things you need to figure out what Chris Tyree does well as a runner.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if he's a gap scheme guy, or if he's a buck sweep guy, or an outside zone guy, or a counter guy, whatever, then run those things when he's in the game. And then when Logan Diggs is in the game, you run. There has to be some sort of, okay, if Chris Tyree's best plays are these 5 run plays and Logan Diggs' 5 best run plays are these 5 different run plays, you can't take 10 run concepts into a game. Right. You've got to find, okay, what are the 2 or 3 runs that he's really good at and call them more. You don't invent new runs for him if he can't execute your offense and he can't play. He can. So I need to see them do a better job of that. And again, I'll say it again. If Chris Tyree, the only excuse for Chris Tyree not to get 8 to 10 offensive touches a game is if he just happened to go 70 on like his first 3 touches.
Right.
Or something. You know, I mean, I'm being hyperbolic, but you get the point, right? Like if he's taking it to the house or getting 50 yards, then okay, well, we tried to get him 8 touches, but he kept flipping scoring on them, you know, and so
dang it.
But the point being, you need to do a better job of getting all 3 of them involved next year. You don't have to have that guy that Kyron was. That doesn't mean Logan Diggs can't go out there and rush for $1,000. It doesn't mean Chris Tyree can't go out there and rush for $1,000. It just means you can utilize that depth chart a little bit more effectively next year.
Fair enough.
Maybe Logan's getting 15 carries a game compared to 18 to 20 for Kyron.
Right.
And kind of going about it that way. And that's what I'd like to see.
Okay, I am going to throw this question up here, and then I've got to run, Brian. But Brandon has a question here. He says, Brian, have you watched film of Chris Visna? Thoughts?
Visna?
Visna? Is that how it's pronounced? Okay, so. Cool. Tom Loy's opinion is first come, first serve between him, Moore, and Arnold. Impressive offer list so far.
If they take Jackson Arnold first come, first serve, I'm going to lose my stuff. And lose a lot of faith in Tommy Rees as an evaluator of quarterbacks. I mean, I think Tommy's done a lot of good things, but this is the one area that he's got me nervous because I look at the whole, you could have had Drew Aller or Sam Horn, but you chose Steve Angeli. You know what I mean? Or you handled your business in a way that you ended up with Steve Angeli. And that's not a knock on Steve Angeli, but he's not Drew Aller, because look what Drew Aller's become. Right? This is what we said he was going to be.
Right, exactly.
And so Jackson Arnold's a good football player. And if Notre Dame ends up with Jackson Arnold because they miss out on other guys, so be it. If they miss out on Chris Visna because they miss out on Drew Arnold, Dante Moore or Nico, then so be it. He's a good football player. He's a kid from Alabama, 6'3", big, kind of got like a Jack Cohn type of stature, but he can run. He's not a runner, Vince. He can run. He's a mobile kid that can run.
Sure.
Nice arm, throws a good deep ball, seems pretty accurate. I mean, ball placement seems pretty good. He's got a lot of tools. He's not Dante Moore. And if Notre Dame takes him with Dante Moore still on the board, I'm going to be a little ticked off because, look,
Makes
Dante
sense.
Moore is just a different cat.
Right.
And Nico, maybe I might walk that one back a little bit because I don't know how great of a fit Nico is. But if Dante Moore is still on the board, you don't take another quarterback unless you just feel like we're fading with him.
Gotcha.
That better be what I hear. But if it truly is first come, first serve, and that's not what I've been told by sources, but Tom also just doesn't make stuff up. Somebody told him that, right? And so that would bother me because it would tell me that they don't understand how important it is to get a top quarterback, that they're willing to do that kind of thing. Vince, where are you, by the way?
I am going to throw up this at 12:23.
Okay.
So pretty. John, will Ryan Barnes or Philip Riley emerge in the Fiesta Bowl? Are they the key to competing with elite offenses in 2022?
Did you want to answer that before you left?
Nope.
You just wanted
it to you, brother.
Okay.
I just put that way you see where I'm at. Still 12:23.
Okay. Thank you for that, Vince.
You're welcome, sir.
So I can't take little lunch breaks now and duck out, eat some of my sandwich because you're leaving.
Yeah, sorry, buddy.
That's all right.
I blame the delivery guy.
Yes, I'm going to. Trust me, they sent me a survey like y'all might not want to do that. You might not want to do that.
Don't do that. Not now.
All right. So John A1, appreciate the question. John asks, I'll read it again. Will Ryan Barnes or Philip Riley emerge in the Fiesta Bowl? Are they key to competing with elite offenses in 2022? I think they are part of that. I feel like like part of this is like, look, I still feel like Clarence Lewis was thrust into the rotation earlier than anticipated. I think Clarence is always a guy that was going to need a couple years to develop. And so I think we are far from seeing the best football from Clarence Lewis. But I don't know if Clarence is ever going to be a guy that I look at and I say, boy, that's just an elite football player, boy, right there. I mean, that's just a guy that's special and he's going to be a great player. Could he be a good player? Yes. But I feel like to play with Bama, to play with the Ohio States, the teams that really have those elite receiving cores of what I think USC is going to end up having here pretty soon with Lincoln Riley, then I think that, all right, we got some breaking news here. I got to pull this up real fast. All right, I got to publish a couple stories. Notre Dame has just landed Billy Schrouth. All right. Let's see here. I got to just give me 1 second, folks. I got to get this going. All right. So Notre Dame has picked up a commitment from Billy Schrouth. We will talk. We will have a show about this here in a little bit, kind of breaking this down more. But if you all can just bear with me, I have to get this story up and running. And of course, Vince takes off right when all this happens. So you'll just have to bear with me here. Please be patient. But I'll try to just give me 1 second. And this is what happens. This is why I'm interviewing recruiting people next week, because it would be great to have somebody that could just kind of handle this and take care of this when I have to, when I'm doing a show, you know what I mean? That'd be a really, really nice thing to have. And I'm hoping that very, very soon we will have that all figured out. So quite a big pickup for Notre Dame today. Billy Schrouth is a good one. So as I'm doing this, I'll talk just briefly about Billy Schrouth. And I think we may have a show about Billy specifically here in a little bit. But this was my number one lineman left on the board. Billy Schrouth was a kid that for me from the beginning was a must get. I mean, along with like the Jake Taylors and the guys that I really liked in this class, he was a must get for me. He is a very talented player. He's a guard, athletic, physical, really good defensive lineman too. And the thing is, he's 6'5", he's got really long arms. He's been a guard in high school. The thing that I've always felt about him, though, is he's the kind of kid that I've always felt could play tackle. He didn't in high school, but I think Billy's a guy that could play tackle. I'm not saying Notre Dame's going to play him at tackle. I'm not saying that's going to be the case at all. What I am saying is I think he could play tackle. I think he's a kid that has that kind of ability that he could play tackle. And because he's athletic enough, he's long enough. I don't know if he's got the demeanor for it. That's the only question mark that I would have, because he is a physical, athletic kid, plays with good pad level. He's a good technician, but I love the combination of length, athleticism, and power. I was discussing him the other day with a friend of mine about a week ago. We were talking about Billy, and he said he thinks he's the second best interior player that Notre Dame has signed under Kelly. And obviously they're not going to get him under Kelly now. This is going to be Marcus Freeman's first pickup. But the point was, of like the last 10 years, obviously with Quentin Nelson being number one, I kind of thought that there's a couple other guys I would at least be in conversation with. But I mean, Billy is definitely in the top 3 or 4, in my opinion. There's no question about that. He's definitely in the top 3 or 4. He is one of the best interior players that Notre Dame has signed under Brian Kelly, the era now obviously the Marcus Freeman era. So this is a big pickup for Notre Dame. This is a talented kid. This is a kid that I view as being, maybe could come in and play somewhat early. He's a kid that has a chance to compete within his first couple years to be in the 2 deep, if not a starting position. I'm not saying he's going to start as a freshman, but I'm saying to be in that conversation. Now, let's get to John A1's question here about Ryan Barnes and Philip Riley. I don't know if they're going to emerge in the bowl game. I don't know where Notre Dame is on that. I do think that those guys plus Benjamin Morrison and Jaden Mickey are, in fact, the key to competing with the elite offense of 2022. I just don't know if Clarence Lewis is that guy. As a pure outside corner, he's smart, he's heady, he's tough. I just think he lacks the top-level athleticism. I think Barnes, more so than Riley, has that athleticism. And then, of course, Mickey and Morrison do as well. So I think those are guys that I look at and say they're the ones that to me, if this team is going to be in elite secondary, you need one of the freshmen or the sophomores to really step into the mix on that one. Brandon says, can we get any more clues info even on the board about the O-line coach position? I'm getting extremely excited about the possible development. So, Brandon, I put something on the board about that, and I'll just kind of share a little bit of that here. I'm not have names I'm going to throw out, but I've been told that one of the reasons it may not end up being Chris Watt is because they have received a ton of interest. I was told there's been over 10 coaches that have reached out to Notre Dame so far about that open offensive line position, including some bigger name guys and some guys in the National Football League. But I was told it's over 10 because it is a coveted position. About the only person that didn't think highly of Notre Dame's offensive line talent apparently was Brian Kelly. But there's a lot of people that recognize how talented this team is on the offensive line. But as far as clues info, there is no clues or info in regards to I think they're leaning in this direction. I think they're vetting the process. They're getting a lot of interest. They're doing their due diligence and making sure that they find the right guy. I think that's really the key. And I don't think they're in any rush because the thing is you're going to sign all now 5 of the kids that are committed are all going to sign next week. And I believe it was Tom Loy reported today that Ty Chan there were some rumblings about Ty Chan may not sign until February. I believe Tom Loy reported today. I think it was Tom reported today that he's going to sign on Wednesday, which I always felt that he would. And so I don't think you need to rush it. Find the right guy. And if it's Harry Heastan, great. If it's not Harry Heastan and it's somebody else that can be a great coach and great recruiter, go for it. That's why I try not to get too much into the guys that I would like. You know my stance on the Heastan-Watt combination, but that's not the only path to having a great offensive line, in my opinion. John A1 says, Michael Mayer's been great. Is it possible to get more from him? Yes. I think Notre Dame, the one thing Notre Dame needs to do in the bowl game and next season is do more when it comes to getting Michael Mayer involved more down the field. I think that's a big key. They need to use him more on seams, which we started to see a little bit late, but find more ways to allow him to attack teams down the field. I think using him to stretch the field is something that absolutely needs to happen. No question. And then also, and I'm going to pull this up because I think Andrew has a great point. Andrew says, I think he could be more of a red zone target, but he already has 60 catches. That's about as much as you can get from a tight end. See, that's not the way to look at it. I agree with you in the first part, but I don't think that's the way to look at it, Andrew. It's not about the volume. It's about how they're using him. And I think that is the thing, because when you talk about getting more out of him, it's not just about production. Is the production happening in a way that it stresses the defense in the greatest possible manner. So right now, Michael Mayer's production, a lot of it comes on short to intermediate stuff. He's caught very few downfield shots. Some, very few. And so, as a defense, you have to defend Michael Mayer. But the reason I don't think a lot of teams double team him as much as you'd think that they would is because so much of it is short. So they're just going to keep in front of him and try to keep him from, making plays after the catch, which is easier said than done. I think if they're using him more to stretch the field, now you have to defend him in different ways, which then opens up so many more opportunities for other players. So I do think that needs to happen. I'm going to work through some of these questions as quickly as possible, because then I really want us to try to I want to try to wrap up the mailbag and then kind of set a time where we're going to talk more about Billy Schrauth and recruiting. But I definitely want to get to a lot of these questions. John A1, does Chris Tyree need to be complemented by another back, or is there more to his game that we haven't seen? There's a lot more to his game that we haven't seen, John, but I still think he always needs to be complemented by another back. Chris Tyree's not going to be a 20 carry game guy. He's not going to be a 20 touch per game guy. I don't know if he's got the body for that. But I do believe, however, that he needs to do more than he has. There's a lot more to his game than we've seen, but he needs to be used differently. And so that's my point. And John A1 had a nice comeback to Andrew. He says, good point. I thought we'd see more back shoulder fade so he can use his length and size. Again, that's another area. It's not the volume that can necessarily improve. It's how they use him. And so what we've talked about this summer is, the numbers, can take a jump. Obviously, when you look at Michael Mayer's production, he had 64 catches, 768 yards, 5 touchdowns. Maybe the 64 catches doesn't improve. Maybe it goes down a couple catches. But what I would like to see is the yards and the touchdowns go up because of how they're using him. And there's things he's going to continue to get better at. He's a sophomore. There's parts of his game he's going to improve upon. There's no question about it. Let's see here. Domer TX 22. What gives you confidence Freeman has the conviction to make tough moves? For example, get rid of an assistant not cutting it on the trail. He keeps himself accountable, but how about other coaches? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I don't. We've said that from the beginning. I don't know how he's going to handle that. It's one thing to have a theory or a thought on how you're going to handle that. It's a completely other thing to say we're going to do this. We're gonna do this when I'm the head coach, and then having to look a guy in the eye whose wife whose wife your wife's friends with, whose kids your kids are friends with, or them and you like them and you like him, but he's not getting the job done, and then you got to tell him he's fired. That is not an easy thing to do, no matter how much you think you may be prepared to do that. So honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I don't. I mean, we have to see it. I think at the end of the day, he's a competitive guy that wants to win. And I think that's the thing that gives me confidence is he knows he's got to do that in order to be successful. Tyler Bedwell, what is the latest on CJ Williams and Amorian Walker? Why does Notre Dame allow Walker to stay committed if he's actively looking to go elsewhere? It seems like it has gone beyond doing his due diligence. Latest I've heard on CJ Williams, he's going to visit USC this weekend after his state championship game. Everything that I'm told, Notre Dame feels quite confident that they're going to keep him in the class. We'll find out, but Notre Dame seems confident on that. Walker, I'd have told him to walk a long time ago. Maybe they end up signing him on Wednesday, but if they do, is there a guarantee he's going to stick around? It just seems like he doesn't really want to be a part of this. And I agree with your sentiment. I absolutely agree with your sentiment. Nicholas has a comment. He says Oklahoma State's weakness is their cornerbacks, defensively speaking, and their quarterback, as he is bipolar on a game-to-game basis and all, would try to get the cornerbacks on Mayer in coverage often, plus blitzing more often. I think their safeties are pretty good in run support. I think their safeties can be beat in the pass game. And we saw that a little bit. And linebackers as well. We saw a little bit against Baylor. But, yeah, if you can get him matched up on corners against any team, that's a matchup I would like to take. John A1 says, in the 2022 class, do you now see Craig, Chan, Wagner, and potentially Shrouth as guys that can play tackle? I think Craig can. I think all 4 of those guys can. Even Joey Tonona could. I mean, all 5 of them could play tackle. I just don't think all of them are ideally suited for tackle. Chan is a tackle that could play guard. Shrouth is a guard that could play tackle. Craig, they're recruiting to play center. Wagner, they're recruiting to play tackle. And then Tonona, they're recruiting to play interior. Guard, center is kind of where they're looking at. But I think this is a really good class. I don't think this class has like the Blake Fisher. There's no Blake Fisher in this class. There's no Quentin Nelson. There's no Liam Eichenberg, in my opinion, who I thought was just, a top 50 player. But the 3, 4, and 5 is as good as they've had in any 3, 4, and 5 class, in my opinion. And I would honestly rank Emil Wagner as number 5. And if you have a recruiting class where Emil Wagner is your number 5 offensive lineman, it's a really good recruiting class. And what a lot of people don't know is, and John, because you and I were, well, actually, no, it wasn't you and I. It was me and Kenny Moore. We were talking about Tommy Rees as a recruiter. What a lot of people don't realize is Tommy Rees had a big role in landing a lot of these guys, especially Billy Shrouth. Tommy Rees was the primary recruiter for Billy Shrouth for months. And, that was obviously a big pickup for them. Chris Basker, estimate is a dog, man. Has many short yardage conversions in his future. I think so, too. Joseph Steve says, I think the earlier signing period and the fact we are getting on athletes earlier is a great opportunity to help more athletes to get into Notre Dame. Thoughts? I mean, I think the early signing period helps, but yeah, I think it helps. I think it allows you to get guys sooner. I would change it. I would have it earlier in the year. I would have it before the season for kids that want to do it, and just give them outs. If a coach leaves, then you can be released from your letter of intent. But I would do it sooner. But yeah, I mean, Notre Dame isn't necessarily opening up more opportunities to athletes. It's just more athletes are looking to take advantage of the opportunity than in the past. I think that's, for me, really the difference. Blake Kajar, with Trevor Mendelson on the road recruiting, is it safe to assume Jeff Quinn won't be coaching the bowl game? I have not been told that. I have not been told he won't be coaching the bowl game. I guess we'll find out here soon because practice to start this weekend. But I have not been told that. I just know that Jeff Quinn is not coming back next year, and I don't know if you want a guy that's not coming back next year for certain, not coming back out there on the road recruiting. But we'll find out. We'll find out this weekend because they have a practice this weekend, I believe, and so we'll find out for sure if he's going to be there. James B says, Buckner's lock for quarterback next year, or is another transfer QB possible, and who? I don't think it's a lock that he's going to start. He's going to have to beat out Drew Pine first. I don't believe Notre Dame is looking to bring in a quarterback. I mean, look, if Caleb Williams calls, you talk to him, but my understanding is not that it's not that they are a lock, that they're not looking for a quarterback. Well, they're not looking for a quarterback. They wouldn't necessarily close the door to it if the right guy came, but they want to focus on the kids they have on the roster. Corey D, I just want to get that up there. Rob Osgood. Hey, folks, first time here. Welcome, Rob. Welcome to the show. Appreciate that. Let's get down to some more comments. Jonathan Hilkema asks, talking about the guys leaving, how great does this look for this program? We're so good that we can have our best players sit and still dominate. We can do what's best for our players while also maintaining dominance. I'm not going to really dive into this because I think it's a little bit controversial. I don't have the same opinion that other people have on guys sitting out bowl games. And I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'm not going to dive too much into it. In Kyle Hamilton's situation, fine. You've had an injury. You don't want to play. Don't play. I get it. I don't like a guy that's played all year that's healthy, as far as we know, sitting out a bowl game. Finish what you started. And the fact that we're, as society, so willing to just accept that guys just basically quit on their team because it's what's best for them, I don't like that. Because when do we draw the line? Like, is it okay for them to do it for a bowl game? And say, well, bowl games don't mean anything. Well, once you get your second loss in the middle of the year, you're not playing for championship anymore, so the rest of your games don't mean anything, right? So why don't you just quit in the middle of the year? I mean, when do we draw the line at some point in time? If you are healthy to play, you see it through and play. I mean, look, there's a lot of guys on Notre Dame's football team that have NFL draft decisions, and they're still playing. So, I mean, so he means more because why? Because he's going to make more money in the NFL. I feel like we've become a society is so dominant by, as long as it equals money, it's okay to do whatever, as long as it means you're making money. I don't agree with that. I think we have too much of that in our society. And that's just my opinion, right? It's my high horse or whatever you want to be. But I just feel like doing the right thing is more important than doing the thing that's going to make you the most money. And that doesn't mean that playing is always the right thing. If we found out that Kyron has been battling some injuries, been playing through some injuries, then my stance changes. But just to sit out just because of you don't want to have happen what happened to Jalen Smith, I'll say it again. There was a cornerback from Washington that was going to be a borderline first-round pick that goes out and he tears his knee up at the pro day. You never know when it's going to happen. And so, at some point in time, you commit to a team, you stay with that team unless you have an injury. And Kyron chose not to do that. It is what it is. I don't like it. I don't dislike him. It doesn't necessarily change my opinion of him because he's just a product of the culture that we've created. And I don't like it. I don't like it. OC Irish fan says overall team development is important between now and Oklahoma State game Ohio State game next September. Happy to see younger players get reps versus a good Oklahoma State team. Go Irish. That is one of the advantages of guys leaving. There's no question about that. All right. Triple Deck Poe. Hi, Vince. Hi, Brian. Hope your day gets better, Brian. Yeah, I got this sandwich just like sitting right beside me. I haven't eaten all day. I took a couple bites during, but you know what? I can't. And OC Irish says, BD need to switch to Jersey Mike's for a better sub and maybe better delivery. I don't know about the delivery. I've never really loved Jersey Mike's, to be honest with you. I've had them a couple times. And I didn't really like them, to be honest with you. Yeah, I didn't really enjoy them. Maybe I might give them another chance because I'm about sick of Jimmy John's. But it's like right by it's like literally a mile and a half from my house. It's by far the closest place. And sometimes they'll get here in 10 minutes, and today it took over 40 minutes. So I'm a little annoyed. Johnny Jimenez on Anthony Lucas. Do you believe signing him or not signing him is based on timing, academics, or believing one school gives him a better chance to get the NFL over another? I think it's about the latter, Johnny. I think it's about he sees A&M and Bama as a school that gives him a better chance to get the NFL. I don't agree with it. If you look at Notre Dame's production, Notre Dame's produced more D linemen. And I think part of it too is just reputation, like flashy programs. Notre Dame isn't that yet, even though they've produced more defensive linemen to the NFL in the last 3-4 seasons than Texas A&M. They still don't have the same reputation of producing that, which is I'd be curious to see if that when or if that changes. Trip Bergen says, any idea what 2023 cornerback Mick Mickens was visiting yesterday? I believe that was Christian Gray. And you asked about him visiting this weekend. I don't know if Christian Gray's visiting this weekend. I know he didn't visit Justin Rhett. I don't think he did because he was out. He visited Justin Rhett last week, I believe. Trip Bergen says, if so, what are your thoughts on Christian Gray? I like Christian. Notre Dame likes Christian Gray a lot. He is a guy that he's a little undersized. I don't love his lack of size. He's got great feet, great hips. He's really sticky in coverage. He'll hit, but he's a cover player, and he reminds me a lot of Jade Mickey, a guy that I know the staff liked. And so they're trying to mix sort of the bigger, longer corners with the guys that are cover players. Obviously, Justin Rhett's more of a bigger, taller, longer guy, and Christian Gray's a cover guy. But they like look. There's like 4 or 5 corners from day one that the staff loved. It was AJ Harris. It was Malik Muhammad. It was Justin Rhett. It was Christian Gray. And there's one other name that I'm forgetting. I don't think it was Caleb Presley. I'm trying to remember who the 5th guy was. But Christian Gray was part of that from day one. He was a guy that Mike Mickens and the staff liked from day one. And so if you're able to get him, again, it's a lot of work to be done. If you're able to get Justin Rhett, who's going to announce on Saturday between Notre Dame, Georgia, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Tennessee, I believe, then you've got 2 of your must-gets, your A guys, right? And that would be certainly a heck of a class, in my opinion. Nicholas Samaya says, it's my first mailbag. How long do they usually go? Usually they go until we get all the questions answered. Today, I'm going to try to hustle through this because I want to kind of pause and then come back here in a little bit. So if you're listening now, we're going to probably get about 15 more minutes of questions, and then we're going to end it early. And then we're going to come back here around 3:00 and do a Billy Schrouth podcast to focus on recruiting. But I definitely want to get to all y'all's questions so far. A lot of talk about sitting out the bowl game. Some we've already answered. All right. Here's an interesting one. Zach Nichols. Hypothetical. Let's say Marcus Freeman had signed with Notre Dame in 2004. Everything in his career plays out the same way. Comes back to Notre Dame this season, is promoted in-house. Would he have enough distance from the program like he does now to see the problems with the program? Are we lucky Marcus Freeman didn't sign with Notre Dame? I don't think it. I mean, it's hard for me to say one way or the other because it didn't happen. I don't think anyone that played in the program from 2004 to 2007 or 8 would have any problem seeing flaws in the program. I don't think, because you said his career plays out the same way, which means he would have been a GA at Ohio State. He would have still coached at Purdue and Cincinnati and those kind of things. He still would have played in the NFL. Would he have enough distance from the program? Yeah, I think he would. I mean, I think that anyone that is smart, whether you went to Notre Dame or not, you can look at what is successful in college football and where Notre Dame is and say, hey, here's the things that they're doing that we can do. Here's the things that we're doing we can't do. Here's the things that we can do that they can't do, and you figure it out. And I don't think you need to be not a Notre Dame grad to understand that, in my opinion. Ty B asks, will there be a talent gap when we play Ohio State next year? Honestly, Ty, and this is not meant to be dismissive at all, ask me this after all the deadline for players to declare, because if Notre Dame, if everybody that can come back comes back other than Kyle or Kyron, and Ohio State loses, they're going to lose their receivers, they lose Zach Harrison, they lose, all these guys, then my stance will change. I need to see who comes back first. That's really going to be the big thing for me. Let me see who comes back. Then I'll have a much better feel for where the talent gap is. But I don't think there's a big talent gap between Notre Dame and Ohio State overall. I think there's positions where Ohio State's better than Notre Dame. I think there's positions where Notre Dame is better than Ohio State. And right now I would say Ohio State's better at the position that matters most, quarterback. But let's see how Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner progress this offseason. All right. A lot of comments here. A lot of the things we've got to. All right. Rob Thidoff says, Brian and Vince, I was excited when my Steelers drafted Chase Claypool, but it seems like he has taken the Deshaun Kaiser route in the NFL and has become immature prima donna thoughts. I don't really pay a lot of attention to the NFL. The only thing I know about any issues like that are what people put on Twitter. I honestly haven't watched a full NFL game all year. So I don't know what's going on. I think Chase is a bit of a free spirit, I guess is a way to say it. And I do think he needs to grow up a little bit as a player. But he's in his second year as a pro. And we'll see what the leaders on that team do and how they handle it. If those things are happening, that's always going to be – if you have leaders that can kind of get a young guy – because I think Chase is a good kid. I think he'll listen to leaders. But, depending on – but again, part of it is I don't really know what the issues are. Irish Hammer 54. Do you think Freeman will change the atmosphere at Notre Dame and start to ask the former players to play a more important role in the program's future, like Ohio State and SEC does? Notre Dame has many legendary players. I have been told that is the case, that he is about that. Because again, he was a player. He understands that. I've been told that's going to be the case, and I know a lot of alums that are very happy that he's the new head football coach. There's no question, no question. Joseph O'Hare asked, hey, Vince and Brian, love the show. Do you think the Irish need to improve their football facilities, and what improvements would you want? We discussed this a little bit the other day. To me, I think their facilities and their stadium is excellent. Their indoor facilities as good as it gets. There's a lot of really good things about the facilities. They are already planning to upgrade the Goog, which is sort of the football building. Notre Dame is not competing because of the facilities. There's always money to be spent there, but Notre Dame has done a ton lately in the last 8 to 10 years to have great facilities, in my opinion. Johnny Jimenez says, I watched film on Junior, Tuliamaka, Josh Burnham, Jalen Sneed, and Nolan Ziegler. Junior and Sneed look ready for freshman playing time. Burnham and Ziegler look like they need some work with block destruction and recognition. Thoughts on all? I think Junior has Jalen has a lot of those needs too. Josh Burnham, thing about him is he plays quarterback. He's just getting by on God-given ability. I think you give him a spring and a summer, I think all four of them will be able to compete as freshmen. Not saying they're all going to play, but I think all four of them are going to be there. I think Josh's thing is Josh is just getting by on athleticism at linebacker. He's not a guy, in my opinion, that is really a like refined player. Because he's just athletic, but he plays quarterback in high school. He won the Gatorade Player of the Year, so he's certainly going to need some time to continue developing as a player. But you get him in a spring program, he's gonna be just fine in that regards, just fine. Okay, let me get down here. We got some questions. I'm gonna get to some of these super chats here before we kind of wrap up. Oh, here's a good one. Corey D. Brandon Vince prediction: who starts at linebacker next year? What will the two deep look like? I think we will see Maris Luafau starting, and we'll see Prince Collie as the 2D as the second to start the season. Mike is going to be, I would imagine, J.D. Bertrand and Bo Bauer battle. At Rover, it's going to be Jack Kaiser, and I don't know who else is going to be at Rover. I don't know if Paul Moal is going to come back. I don't know if one of the freshmen will get a shot there. I'm not quite sure. That's one position I'm not quite sure of. But I think the inside will be those guys. But, maybe Bo Bauer doesn't come back. I think that he is. I've been told that he is, but we'll have to see. But that's what I imagine it looks like. The freshmen will have a shot to compete in battle, but they're going to have to go earn it, in my opinion. I want to get down to some super chats before we get out of here. And again, we're going to come back at 3:00 to break down the Billy Schrauth commitment, and then we'll do some Q&A on top of that as well. Kulin Turner, the first time I ever see Notre Dame live, it will be the Fiesta Bowl. Congrats on that. Dreams come true. That's excellent. Tyree, Diggs, and Estime are about to dominate. Thank you for the super chat, and congrats on getting a chance to go see Notre Dame play for the first time. That's going to be a heck of a – so your first game is going to be to kick off the Marcus from era. That's pretty cool. TFN clan. Jalen Sneed starting next year. It's possible. I mean, he's very talented. I don't think he'll start next year barring injury, but he's a talented kid. I wouldn't put anything past him, but it would surprise me a little bit. Maris Luafau is a kid that Notre Dame staff loves. So I see him being hard to beat out, assuming he's healthy. Jim Halloran, anything new on the O-line coach? What do you think about Tim Grunhard? Learned from Joe Moore, played and coached in the pros. Is he coaching now? I'm not aware that Tim Grunhard is coaching now. And so if he's not coaching now, then I that's not a route I would go. As much as I like and respect Tim Grunhard, I think Andy Heck's a name that I've heard, but I don't know if that's a name that people say should look at it or someone that actually is looking at it. He's obviously the O-line coach, I believe, for the Chiefs right now. Corey D says, does Marcus Freeman have the power to tweak Notre Dame's uniforms? Let's go back to the gold pants from the 80s and 90s. No more mustard. Are you hearing anything about possible change to the pants? Corey, I doubt that that's not at the top of Marcus Freeman's list right now of things to do. But could he have a say? I'm sure he would have some input. Ultimately, it's not his decision, but he would have some input. I've said all along, the color combination that Notre Dame used for the 2019 BC game at home is exactly what their uniform should look like, which is more of a true gold pant and not the ugly mustard pants that we have now. TFN clan with another super chat. If Pine doesn't get the starting, he will transfer, or will he stay knowing Buckner is a runner and could get hurt? Drew Pine is not going to transfer on his team. He is not going to leave in the middle of the season. He's not going to leave after getting beat out for a job. He will graduate from Notre Dame and then decide whatever it is he's going to do best. But he will, if he gets beat out in fall camp next year, I do not see Drew Pine leaving. That's just not the kind of kid he is. That would shock me quite a bit. Tom Chris 2488 saw where Notre Dame is contacting the quarterback Florida decommit Nick Evers. Would he be a take for you, or would you try to get two QBs in 2023? He would be a take for me. Notre Dame did reach out. He's going to go to Oklahoma. Rob Lobo 123 is Eli Raridan's player comparison. Bowers from Georgia. They're different players. Bowers is more in the Michael Mayer mold. Eli Raridan is kind of a tall, skinny pass catcher guy. That would not be my comparison. Jim DeMatteis, thank you for the super chat, Jim. Will the Notre Dame defense look different from last year now that Coach Freeman's head coach, and who will be the DC? He has not mentioned who the DC is going to be yet. I don't know who that's going to. I don't know if it's going to be Mike Elson get promoted. I don't know if he's going to hire someone from outside. I will be shocked if the defense is going to be philosophically different than what he wants. I mean, clearly there's a reason he believes in the defense he believes in. I think it's going to be about finding someone, whether it's Elston or somebody else or Mickens or some kind of co-coordinator situation. Whoever he hires is going to run the defense that he wants to run. And that's how it should be, in my opinion. So I'm going to get down to some more super chats before we get out of here. Like I said, we're going to be back at 3 o'clock. If you're watching this live, we'll be back at 3 o'clock. If you're watching it later, then we'll have another show saved or we'll have a podcast coming up later. Robert with a super chat. Thank you, Robert. We need to use 3 running backs in multiple sets and different formations. Too much talent there. I agree. If you have the talent, use it, Robert. Agree with you completely. And I think there's, because of the complementary skill sets of the players they have at running back, I think you can certainly use those guys in a complementary fashion. Absolutely. Jay with a follow-up. Tom Lloyd did not say first come at the quarterback position for 23. He said Rees wants to evaluate these kids in person this spring unless more wants in. Thank you for clearing that up, because that would have been a bad strategy. Very bad strategy. So thank you for that. Mace K, come on, Brian, show some emotion about Shrouth. Woo! Okay, I will do that when we do our Shrouth pickup for sure. Doug Nimke, would you comment on Notre Dame switching the USC-Stanford home game at the end of the season and go to California in October? With plane travel, the recruiting excuse is gone. Use our home field. It's not just about that. It's also about just, I mean, there's a tradition. I don't mind it. I don't have a problem going out to California last game of the year. I kind of like it. I mean, again, I think it's a traditional thing. Here's the thing I would say, Doug. I would only do it for me. I would only do it with USC. That's the change I would make. I would have USC be the last game of the year at USC every year and then play them October at home. That's just, I like tradition. I think it works. I think it makes sense. I think when USC is good, it gives Notre Dame a chance to always end their season with a big victory. What I don't like is they also do the same as Stanford. There's no reason for me to have Stanford at the end of the year. That's not a traditional thing. That didn't start till the 90s. That's something that they've done during an era where they haven't won. I don't care about having that game. I don't even care about having Stanford on the schedule every year. So to me, Doug, I would like to see it every other year and not end the season on the West Coast every year. Because to your point, you don't need to do it for recruiting the way that you used to need to do it for recruiting, in my opinion. Super chat from Mateo Vidal. Thank you for the super chat. Do the opt-outs change your bowl prediction? No, they don't. I didn't think Kyle was going to sit out. Kyron I wasn't sure of, but I think Notre Dame's running backs are very good, even without him. So I think they'll be fine there. And I don't know if Oklahoma State's going to have anybody sit out. It's still kind of early in that process. They may have some kids sit out. I don't know the answer to that. Real Sports Talk with Alex. I thank you for the super chat, Alex. I know you're not a mind reader. I'm glad you recognize that. But do you see any surprises happening with kids committing Love IB and the chat? I don't really know of any surprises. None that I'm aware of. If it's going to be a surprise, it's probably going to be a kid that doesn't sign and go somewhere else. I don't know that there's anybody right now that Notre Dame would sign, in my opinion. That I don't see that. Right. Patrick Fitzgerald, possible to see some more Estime and Kyron sitting out. His bus-like style running is fun to watch. I hope so. I mean, I think he's a kid that certainly could see more action, but he's still going to be 3 behind Diggs and Tyree, in my opinion. William Lawrence, do you believe Ramon Henderson could be an effective starter next year? Based on what we saw in 2 games that he played, yes, I do. Now, he's got to develop and grow and do all that, but based on what we saw, a very good start to his career. No question about it. Matt, 2011 GT with Super Chat. Thank you for that. Given that Williams said he was reconsidering coming back next year, do you think the coaching staff had a role in his decision? I don't know. Look, I'm going to say this again for those that are new, and I hope that everybody hears this, okay? Do not listen to what players say in the middle of the regular season. Don't. And you can go back to Will Fuller. Most players, especially team players, are going to say, I'm coming back or I'm thinking about coming back, because honestly, at the time, they're not thinking about it. I hate that we ask them that question in the middle of the season, because you're never going to get the answer. And then what happens is Kyron says, I'm leaning towards coming back. or I'm thinking about coming back. And then people write stories about it, and then people start, hey, he's going to come back. And rarely do those guys actually come back. I think Kyron is a leader. He's an emotional kid. He loves Notre Dame, and the excitement of the season and Marcus Freeman, he starts thinking about, hey, maybe I might want to come back. But at the end of the day, cooler heads are going to prevail, and he's going to make the decision that's best for him in that regards. And to me, that's going pro. He's making the right decision of going pro. I don't think he's making the right decision to sit out on the bowl game. I don't like that, but I think he's making the right decision to turn pro. And I think at the end of the day, that's what's going to happen. Here's some. Omar, this is apples to oranges. You make personal money decisions just like businesses do, just like Notre Dame will do what's best for them when 5th, 6-year decision player time comes. Number one, 5th and 6-year decisions are done after the season. If Notre Dame went into the players right now and said, hey, Kane and Josh Lugg and Kurt Heinisch and all you guys, listen, we need to get ready for next season. So we're not going to play any of you guys. We want you guys to leave and go do whatever it is you're going to do, because we're focusing on the guys we have come back. People would lose their minds, rightfully so. It'd be a bad thing to do. So no, schools don't do that to players, and Notre Dame doesn't do that to players. So it's a different thing. If it's making a decision after the season, that would be the comparison, not sitting out for the bowl game and Notre Dame making decisions about 5th and 6-year guys after the season. It's a completely different thing. Wendell, our O-line commits, thank you for the super chat. Our O-line commits are all under 300 pounds. Is that deliberate, i.e. going for more athletic guys instead of just size? Why no 300-pound SEC type recruits? Number one, they're not all under 300 pounds. Tai Chan is over 300 pounds. Number two, it's not about it being deliberate. It's about finding the guys that have the skill set to what you look for. They like athletic guys. Sometimes that does factor into it. A lot of times that factors into it. And number three, if you just go look at sizes, for whatever reason, kids in the Southeast tend to be, there's a lot more bigger 310, 315 plus pound kids in the Southeast than there are up north. And Notre Dame tends to get most of their linemen from up north. Ty Chan's from Massachusetts. Craig and Tanona are from Indiana. Emil Wagner is from Ohio. And Billy Schroth is from Wisconsin. They're all northern kids. And for whatever reason, I don't know the answer to that. I have no clue. I don't understand anthropology or any of those type of things that go into it. That just tends to be more bigger kids in the South. Andre Rainey, who's the one recruit that we can't miss on this year and next year? I mean, this year, they've kind of, it is what it is. I think they kind of got most of the guys. You needed to get Tobias Merriweather. You needed to get Jalen Steed Burnham. You needed to get Tyson Ford. You needed to get Benjamin Morrison. I think those are the guys you needed to get. And I think they got most of them. There's a couple other guys, and they got them. Billy Schroth, you needed to get him. You got him. Next year, they only got 5-6 guys in the class, so there's not just one guy. It's a team of 22 people. One guy's not going to make the difference. I think bigger picture, if you're going to say one player, you'd have to go with a quarterback. You've got to get a top quarterback. You have to get a guy that's capable of putting a team on his shoulders and winning a championship. That's an absolute imperative for Notre Dame. Michael S. Super Chat, understanding Kyron Williams' decision. Jalen Smith's injury in a bowl game hurt his signing money. Do you think it shortened his NFL career? Well, he's still playing the NFL, but no one will say that Jalen Smith's the same player he was before. He was never the same player. But I think using that as the all-time reason for it, Notre Dame's played how many bowl games since, and how many guys have had that injury? It was a freaky thing. It happens. And I could use that, and I could make the same counter argument that I've made before of another player that left early and didn't play. I don't think he played in a bowl game, and he goes out and he gets hurt in a pro day. And that hurt his career. It's part of life, and it sucks, but it's not a common thing. And so I just don't think you can always go to that. Some guys, I think it makes sense. Other guys, I don't like it. But at the end of the day, it is a free country, and they have the right to do whatever they choose to do. I have a right to like it or not like it. And other people have the right to disagree with me. That's what makes this all fun. Johnny Jimenez, Battelle at Rover. I don't know if that's going to be a full-time thing. I'm very curious about that. I honestly don't know. That's one thing I'm definitely looking forward to kind of finding out sort of what their plans are with him, because if Foskey goes pro especially, you're gonna need to figure out who's going to be your Viper. I mean, that's a big question I have right now. Matt, 2011 GT, 100% agree about the middle of the season. This was said 2 days ago. I was referring to sitting out the bowl game. It almost looks like he and Hamilton decided together, given the timing. There's a little bit more to it than that. I put something on the message board. I would encourage you to check out. That kind of dives a little bit more into that. All right. That is going to do it for now. Okay, so here's the deal. We are going to leave now. We're going to be back at 3 o'clock. I got to try to see if I can get some people lined up to come on and talk about Billy Schrauth. We're going to be back at 3 o'clock. We're going to go live again at 3 o'clock to break down Billy Schrauth's commitment. We'll dive into some more questions after we talk about Billy and all the recruiting aspects of it. If we'll open things up to questions. So if you had some questions in here today that we didn't get to and you want to bring them back in the next show, let's do it. Okay. But we'll obviously focus on Billy Schrauth's commitment. So thanks to everybody for being with us today. This show was kind of all over the place. I apologize. A lot going on. We'll be a little bit, we'll get back on track next week, but we'll have also a show tomorrow night around 7 o'clock. We're going to preview Justin Rhett's commitment and then hopefully be able to carry his decision when he does it. And whatever decision he makes, he's a 2023 quarterback. We will then discuss it and discuss what's next for Notre Dame. So that's going to be it for now. We'll be back here, like I said, in about 37 minutes to break down the commitment of Billy Schrauth to Notre Dame. Talk to you again very, very soon.